Here's an easy way to make a heavy-duty loft ladder. Out in one of my metal buildings, I have a loft where I store a bunch of stuff, and I've been using this old rickety ladder for years to get up there. Well, it's about time to upgrade. Now there is a specific corner I'd love for this ladder to be, but there are two things I have to keep in mind. First off, there is a door that's over in that area, and the door needs to still be able to swing fully open. And two, at some point I'm probably going to want to be able to move the ladder, so I need to have it mobile. And one more thing, the floor is slightly angled, so I have to keep that in mind as well. Now there's a chance I could probably get away with just using some 2x4s for the side rails, but I'm going to go with a 2x6 because there's a good chance it's going to get used and abused. A quick measurement of the loft shows it's about 104 inches up, so we're going to have to go with a 10-foot board. And testing the angle of the ladder gives us about 15 degrees. Now since the ladder will be leaning at 15 degrees, I would normally cut the feet at 15 degrees as well. But since there's a slight taper to my floor, I'm going to actually cut it at about 17 degrees. Now we want our steps to be about 12 inches apart. So going from the front edge here, we're going to take a measuring tape and measure out a mark about every 12 inches. Then I just have to line up these marks with my speed square, angle this out to 15 degrees and draw a line. Now I could do this for each one, but that could take a while. And since I have a bunch of these, I just made a quick jig out of some scrap wood here. This is cut at 15 degrees and I have a little backup board, so all I have to do is find that mark, line it up, make sure everything's flat. Done. Move to the next one. Now I want to put some footers that'll go under each side of the steps and make it nice and secure footing to each of the side rails. And to do that, I found some discounted wood at the local hardware store. This is a 1x3 and that should work well. Now remember those lines I put on the side rails? Well, I almost attached these incorrectly. I wasn't thinking, but the lines were for the top of each step, not the bottom. So be careful when you're doing that. Now I'm going to have to go back and remeasure, so good thing I made that jig. I can make this real quick and do some secondary lines so we can attach these to the bottom of each of the steps. And on this ladder, it'll be 1.5 inches. Now we're going to take those boards we just cut and line them up with that bottom line. Just like so. We want to make sure that the front edge here is flush with the front of your railing. It might stick off a little bit in the back, but that's okay. And then we're going to put some glue and some screws in here to hold it in place. But before I add the screws, it's a good idea to pre-drill this, and that's what I'm going to do next so I don't accidentally split this. Now that all the supports for the steps are done, we need to cut out the actual steps. Now, I've read that a minimum size for steps for a ladder is 12 inches. That seems a little bit narrow for me, so I'm going to cut these out at 16. Now flip the side rails up on edge, making sure the face or front was facing down, so that way when I slide the steps into place, they'll be nice and level with the front. And so then I positioned the first one, making sure everything was nice and even side to side. And I'm going to put a second and third, clamp it in place, and then we'll add a couple screws in the sides just to make sure everything stays together. Now just putting these screws into the end grain here is not super strong. I'm going to go back later and add one of these structural screws in place once I get all of the steps positioned. Unfortunately, some of these steps are a little bit warped. That's okay, it's wood and it's to be expected. So I've added an extra clamp here so I can make sure that it's nice and flat when I screw it in. Now the loft ladder is almost done, but I gotta go take it out, remeasure it one more time because I still have to make a couple more cuts to make sure it's nice and secure. And then I measured the top of the roof using a speed square and transferred that over to the side of the rails. I then proceeded to use a jigsaw to cut out these notches. They don't have to be perfect, but you do want them pretty close. Now this notch I just cut allows it to sit on top of the surface here and closer to the wall. So now it's a tighter fit and should not move nearly as much. And the feet ended up almost perfectly level. Oh yeah. Now if this was in a commercial setting, I'd definitely secure it to the wall, maybe with some L brackets or just some screws going straight through it into the wood behind it. Now since this is in my building, I'm just going to keep an eye on it, but I don't think it'll move that much. I'm super excited how this loft ladder turned out, and finally I can throw away that old rickety ladder and don't have to worry about falling off of it again. Now you might want to check out one of these other videos.